Hey guys, my name is Kirsty. Welcome back to Upside Down Books. Today, in all honesty, I haven't actually decided what exactly this video was going to be. I've just started filming instead, which is probably not the best way to start a video. I need to do my December wrap-up for you guys, so we're going to be talking about, in fact, we're going to make this a reads video of all the books I read in December, but also let's just talk about 2019 in general. December was not a great month for me at all, really. It was a bit shit. So I didn't get, in all honesty, a lot of reading done. I had loads of plans, a lot of things I wanted to do, plenty of books I wanted to finish before the year was out, and then curveballs were thrown my way, and I have very little to say about December, so we're just gonna look at like what the 3 books, if I read that many in December, and then we're gonna have a look at 2019 on the whole for a slightly more positive spin on this whole thing. So in 2019 I had certain reading goals set. I'm just gonna explain this backstory whilst I figure out where my statistics have gone on my laptop. So in 2019 I had set probably quite a number of reading goals and then only committed to maybe 1 or 2 of them. My main goal was my Goodreads reading challenge, which is something that I aspire to achieve and hit and have done every year on Goodreads, and that was to read 50 books in 2019. And I lowered that because that is lower than what I would usually read. I usually aim for, let's say, on average of 70, because I wanted to read larger books so that I had a larger page count so that I would read some of the bigger books on my TBR. And I did actually achieve this. In all honesty, when you look at my page count versus my number of books and compare that to what some other people did, I'm pretty impressed. And I'm valuing the page count side of things as much as I value the book count these days. So I read 54 books in the end. I managed to get 54 books done in 2019, and guys, if you had actually been there that side by side with me through 2019, I think you would be just as proud as I am that I managed to find time in amongst everything else to do that. 2019 was the year that I started working full-time for the first time, and oh my gosh, full-time work is a whole nother kettle of fish. So that was a fun balancing game of working out how to read a lot of books and do blogging and YouTube and Instagram whilst being incredibly tired all the time, and also whilst living out of home. Lots of challenges. But I managed to accomplish this. I didn't have to lower my goal. 50 was the goal, and the goal I did meet. Now, the reason I wanted to focus on larger books was because in maybe the past few years, I've really been trying to hit 100 books. 100 books is like my lifelong goal at the moment that I want to try and hit with reading. In 2020, as you know by now, I am trying to read 95, so I'm doing a very subtle build up to 100. I find it very hard to read 100 books, so I was like, hey, let's read some big books that keep just ending up consistently on my TBR year after year, because I don't read them because they're going to take too long to read. And I did a great job. Whilst I only read 54 books in 2019, I managed to read nearly 22,000 pages. 22,000 pages is not a bad effort. So if we put this into some sort of, I guess, slightly more accessible comparison, 54 books in 2019 versus 72 books in 2018, 21,700 pages in 2019 compared to 25,799 pages in 2018. That's 4,000 pages difference, but 18 books less. So yeah, that's basically a really long-winded way of saying that I'm actually pretty pleased with that effort. I think I did actually read big books. The way I managed to achieve this goal was largely thanks to audiobooks. But before we get any further into what I read over the year and other statistics and some of my favourite books, we're going to have a little quick squiz specifically at December, as I'm not going to do a specific reading wrap-up for it because I simply did not read that much. Right, so I did in fact only read 3 books in December, and that was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone in the Illustrated Edition, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets in the Illustrated Edition, and Morning Star, which is the 3rd and final book in the Red Rising trilogy by P.S. Brown. I loved all of them. I think I rated all of them 5 stars or very close to, and they were brilliant, but I was expecting to read a lot more and it just didn't happen. So that's pretty much what my December looks like. One statistic that I really like to look at to have a sort of idea of how I've been progressing with getting through my TBR is how many books I bought versus how many books I read throughout the year. And I haven't done this for a few years now, and the last time I did it, it was pretty even Stevens. But the shocking thing for 2019 is that it was really not. And It's honestly quite intimidating. So my goal is never really to actually get through and have a 0 TBR. That's not the goal. I would love my TBR to sit at maybe 100 books that roll through, that I continuously get through, but I kind of sustain that number that I haven't read, because then that's a lot of choice and it's exciting. But currently, I have over 260 books on these shelves behind me that are not read. Now, we know this is a shameful statistic that we have discussed previously. However, I have now worked out how many books I bought / accrued last year, and it's not good, guys. It's not good. So I read 54, and between all the books I received as gifts, that I bought for myself, that I received from publishers, and all the audiobooks, the number is 97. It's 97 new books, guys. So, whoops, that wasn't a very good year for getting that number down. So I'm beginning to wonder whether I'm even going to continue setting this as a challenge, like a subconscious challenge to try and reduce this number, because I enjoy buying them so much. But 97 books bought versus 54 read is not okay. Right, we're gonna have a look at my 2019 reading goals. Welcome to 2019, everybody. Who is excited for a new year? So in 2019, I'm going to be setting myself a Goodreads reading challenge of 50 books. Okay, so the first reading goal that I talked about in that video was to read 50 books. We've already discussed this. I've hit this goal. Well done, me. I specifically did aim for a similar page count, and I think that with a 4,000 page count difference, that's pretty good considering that it was also nearly a 20 book difference as well. So I'm going to count that as pretty much as a win. And I think I'm also going to be changing the way that I log audiobooks on Goodreads. So another thing that I was talking about at the start of the year is changing the way that I log audiobooks on Goodreads to try and work out that page count a bit better, because you can specifically tick and select and use the audiobook version on Goodreads. They have that set up, but it means that there's no page count for it because it's time instead. So on Goodreads I have, and this is something I've taken on board, I log all of my audiobooks as the hardback edition or a paperback edition as that book to get a rough page count for that particular book, which is fantastic. And audiobooks, because I can't see the size of them, have been my main way for tackling big books. So some of the biggest books that I have read this year were in fact audiobooks, but we're gonna get more into statistics after we finish reviewing this video.
I think page count's probably a better way to do it. So I'm going to be counting those in the standard hardback or paperback versions so that I can get a more accurate count of what I'm reading and compare it to the last few years. I'm hoping that this means that I do read some books that I've just been sitting on my TBR for ages, so I've wanted to.
One series that I challenged myself in 2018 to finish and did not do so is Ranger's Apprentice. So I challenged myself to finally finish off and read Ranger's Apprentice. I didn't touch them all year, so that was a total fail, and because it has something that has just been a goal for me for so many years, I feel like I keep putting it off, and I can only hope that in 2020 that I read this, but that was a fail. I did not even touch or consider reading Ranger's Apprentice all year. The other series that I would really like to finish, which I have here, not finish but move on with, is the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. I read book 1, and then when I got book 2 and realised how much bigger it was, I was a bit put off. I really want to set aside some time to finish off this series. Well, not to finish it, but to just read book 2, and then maybe next year I will read book 3. So the Farseer trilogy was another series that I wanted to make progress with, and again is one that I have specifically set myself the goal for this year because I didn't pick it up. The Royal Assassin is such a big book, so that does actually feel like quite a hard fail for the year because it was a big book that I really should have focused on, given that that was my goal, but it didn't happen. Same goes for the Name of the Wind. I can't remember what those are called, the Chronicles or something, but Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I also wanted to finish reading the Kingkiller Chronicles of all the ones that were out so far, but at this point I've actually had a bit of a change of heart over finishing reading those. Whilst I've read The Name of the Wind and I really enjoyed it, and I do want to read The Wise Man's Fear at some point, because we don't have the third book, I don't want to have to reread these all one day just to catch up, so I'm probably not going to read them until Rothfuss actually finishes writing the third book, because I will just forget what happens. So I'm not challenging myself to read that this year. I will probably never finish reading it if the series is not finished in writing.
The other big thing I want to do, which isn't as big and revolutionizing as just reading less and reading more for enjoyment, is I want to read more things that people are recommending to me.
One of my biggest goals for 2019 was to read more recommendations, and I am pleased to say that I did that. I am going to count any sequels to books that were recommended to me also as recommendations, just to clarify that. It's a recommendation goal to read more recommendations by people. Also, I'm going to lump that number in with books that were given to me as gifts. So that means in 2019, my progress towards this goal was 14 books. So out of 54 books, 14 of them were books that were recommended to me or were given to me as gifts. And that is, doesn't sound like a massive statistic, but a good portion of the 54 books that I read were also advanced reader copies, so that takes up a large chunk as well, so that was a healthy balance between those two. And I did get through about 90% of my Christmas books. There are 2 that I can think of that I haven't read for various reasons yet, and that was a big goal, to get through all of my Christmas books, something I'm trying to do again this year. So I'm pretty happy with the effort that I put in towards that one.
I do, however, going back to ARCs, want to prioritise them, and it's disappointing a number of books that I haven't got around to. And whilst a lot of the ones I haven't read are unsolicited, which means they've just been sent to me and I've said thank you and shared pictures and talked about them, I'd really like to get around to reading them.
So out of the 54 books that I read in 2019, 20 of those were actually advanced reader copies, and that is the statistic I am probably the most proud of. So that means in total, with 20 ARCs and 14 recommendations and gifts, it brings us up to 34. So 34 out of 54 is a nice healthy statistic for books that I've been reading specifically to get certain categories of books read. I'm very happy with that. That's over half of my reading being dedicated in a year towards working towards goals, so well done me. And I think for the most part, considering ARCs, and this isn't something that I talked about for 2020 reading goals, I'm not so stressed about them this year because I'm just not at the moment. It's just something that's not particularly bothering me. I've been keeping pretty well on top of them. Some of these books I don't know if I will ever actually want to read. There's certainly a few that I do still want to try and get around to, however, but I feel like I've actually got myself in a pretty happy space with ARCs, so
one book that I've set in stone to be read in March is Mutiny on the Bounty, which I talked about in my book haul.
One specific goal that I had and totally failed on is reading Mutiny on the Bounty, which was a non-fiction, massive chunky book that I bought and really wanted to read and get around to, and I think some stuff happened that made me just really busy in March, which was when I said I would read it, and that didn't happen. So that was a bit of a shame, and I just never got around to it for the rest of the year, and it's something that I've just said, we're not going to try it this year, maybe next year we're going to have a look at it. So that I did not get around to.
Another book I've been meaning to read for ages that I just forget about that I have is Roma by Stephen Saylor. Hopefully in 2019 I can get on to reading this because it's just thick enough to be something I won't pick up because I know it will slow down my progress towards a high yearly book count. So
Roma by Stephen Saylor was the next book I talked about, and no, I didn't get around to reading that one.
Tigana by Guy Gavriel Kay. This book is really quite big. It's just over 800 pages. I think this sounds really interesting.
Tigana by Guy Gavriel Kay, another goal I've set myself that I did not even contemplate picking up. It's just so big and so intimidating, but I'm not ready to get rid of it yet and give up.
This one is Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. Now this one, I don't know why, but I'm particularly enamored with the plot for.
So I think I had possibly more than one classic. The first one that's coming up here is Vanity Fair, and no, I have absolutely no desire right now to read any classics, and I pretty much didn't all year, so again, did not get to that one.
On my notorious list of books that I just really need to get around to reading is The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas.
Three Musketeers, that was a no, although I did very nearly pick that one up. Towards the end of the year I found motivation for it, and then it didn't happen. Right, so that brings me to the end of that wrap-up review, and I think overall the goals that were at the forefront of my mind that I was particularly set on completing, I did a great job on, but on the specifics, I did not. So I'm going to give it a 50-50 positive negative with my attempts for actually reaching my reading goals for 2019. So now we're going to have a quick look at the books that I did read and some of my favourites for the year and some of my least favourites for the year as well. Let's start with the bad. My least favourite book and the one that I rated the lowest in 2019 was Unearthed by Amy Kaufman and Megan Spooner. I didn't really enjoy this. I rated this one 2 out of 5 stars. I don't really rate anything 1 out of 5 stars, so 2 is the lowest rating, but honestly to get a 2-star rating from me is pretty rare as well. I just found this very nothing and wasn't really impressed by the plot twist, and I'd been reading a lot more adult sci-fi this year and I think that probably affected my review of that, but that was my least favourite book and the only book that I rated 2 out of 5 stars. Overall, 4 out of 5 stars was definitely my average rating. I have by far rated more books 4 than I have either 3 or 5. However, I rated more books 5 stars than I did 3 stars, so I would say it's a pretty good reading year on the whole. I seem to have enjoyed the majority of my books. The longest book that I read was The Fiery Cross by Diana Gabaldon, and that is over 1400 pages long. It's an absolutely massive book, and I read that one via audiobook. The shortest book that I read was a really cute little book that I just happened to have called The Storyteller's Daughter, which is a retelling of 1001 Nights, and that was only 218 pages long. So there were only 4 books in 2019 that I added to my all-time favourites list, and those 4 were The Wicked King by Holly Black, Heroes by Stephen Fry, A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer, and Jane Steele by Lindsay Fay. And out of the 4 of those, A Curse So Dark and Lonely is the book that has stuck with me the most. I actually also had a pretty good year for rereading. This is something that I very rarely do, and one of the things I took on as a challenge partway through the year was to start rereading the Throne of Glass series, which I had done, and so there were 3 rereads for this year, and that was Throne of Glass and then Harry Potter 1 and 2. And now I'm just going to rattle off a list of books for you of some of the books that were my favourites from the year. Not my all-time favourites, but my favourite books that I read in 2019. We had Scythe and Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman. I absolutely love this series and I can't wait to finish it. We had Golden Sun, which was the second book in the Red Rising trilogy, and that was absolutely brilliant, and I found that the best out of the 3 books in my opinion. We had The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi, a book I think is highly underrated because it was absolutely magnificent. Could not recommend this book enough. The Boy Who Steals Houses by C.G. Drews, a brilliant contemporary that really pulls at your heartstrings. Fiery Cross by Diana Gabaldon is just a given. I love Outlander and they will always be 5-star reads for me. Circe by Madeline Miller. This was an absolute real achievement to have read this year. I did the audiobook version of it. So many people have told me to read The Song of Achilles. Naturally, I read Circe first. Absolutely loved it. I definitely know that I need to read more of Miller's books now. The Fry Chronicles, which was Stephen Fry's memoirs, I've really enjoyed these, and this is the second one in the 3 of his memoirs. Brilliant. That's all for the books that really stood out for me this year, and now I want to have a quick look at some of the books that really surprised me and that were good, that were better than I expected or I hadn't even anticipated reading, and I'm glad I did. Namely, I would say the biggest surprise on this list would be some of the hard sci-fi and adult sci-fi books that I read. So books like For the Forever War and Childhood's End, these books were something I would never have picked up on my own, and I ended up really enjoying them, so that was lovely to discover that. Something else I really enjoyed was Toffee, which was a book written entirely in prose, and this is something I usually avoid like the plague. I ended up loving, and already in 2020 I have read a book that has also been entirely written in prose, and again have really enjoyed it. There's been some adult fiction I've really enjoyed too. There was a book called Home Fires by Fiona Lowe, which was an advanced reader copy, and I enjoyed that so much, even though that is something I would never pick up for myself. The Ruin of Kings was a big surprise in the sense that it took me 2 attempts to read it, and I didn't enjoy it until maybe about halfway through when I really devoted the energy for it and got really stuck into it. It's a massive, epic, mammoth fantasy that is so worth the effort if you have effort to give. And Wild by Nathan Besser. This book was a faux memoir of some historical figure from 17th or 18th century London, and it was so enjoyable to read. But I think that pretty much sums up my reading year for 2019. I'm pretty pleased with how it went. 2019 was a hard year, and I'm really looking forward to 2020 and all the things that I'm going to achieve. I'm hoping that I'll be able to come back and do my 2020 year in review and be able to say that I have actually achieved a few more of the goals that I set myself, but we will see what happens. Other than that, I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.